10 minutes or less, you can have tremendous impact. That does not require a lot of your time, truly, if you do it right and do it well.
You ever feel like your days fly by and suddenly you realize you haven't really connected with your kids all week? Today, we're diving into what quality time really means and how you can find it even in the middle of a busy life. So, on today's episode of the Dad Central Show, we're going to be talking about finding quality time with kids. And Drew, what do you think about this episode?
It can be a challenge when you feel pulled in many directions, or just in general as a dad. So I've got 5 kids in a blended family. So quality time sometimes feels almost non-existent unless you plan for it, unless you recognize what actual quality time is, and then how to actually build it. So I think it's an important conversation. At least for me, it is.
Yeah, well, I thought like before we do our recording, Drew says, today, he said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I think this one would be great for Drew to talk about with 5 kids and quality time. I think that is a great conversation topic. So before we get into it, we're going to cover 3 areas today: the challenge of time, the redefining quality time, and making it happen. So, as always, before we get into it, we want to say you are watching Dad Central, a parenting podcast to reduce stress and build confidence in fatherhood. And we can't go without saying our show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care, because Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there's a positive impact. So, as we get into the first part of our conversation today, let's talk about the challenge of time. Drew, what are your thoughts?
Oh, well, it never feels like there's enough. I don't feel like I'm as productive as I'd like to be. It feels that there's other people who sometimes step over and take up my time when I don't want to give it, which is a boundaries thing. And it seems, especially with kids, uh, like there's never enough of you to go around, or there's demands that you're like, I don't have time for this. At least that's just my experience, being real. How about you, Ed?
I always say to people, time never lost a fight. And you really put some good things out there, the boundaries thing. And referring back to our great course, Super Dad, Super Kids, that the first chapter or the first module is about you are a super dad. And I always say to dads, you ever feel like you're always just here, there, you're always in demand and you don't have time for yourself, let alone for your kids? There's always someone asking for your time, and it can be just so challenging. But there's so many things and so many priorities, or alleged priorities, that dads have, and prioritizing, etc. And then I think is also a good point about the difference between time spent and time that matters. you
Yeah.
know I think that's a really important point, and if you want to go in on that, I certainly have some takes on it, but I'd like you to give your takes first about time spent and time that matters.
Well, before I talk briefly about it, I'll say I agree with some of the things you just said. Um, in terms of things that you allow to pull at you. And that's where I mentioned the boundaries. And so, as well as this idea, this feeling like there's not enough of you to go around. And so I think dads need to recognize, we take on this role of provider, protector, making sure solve problems, we get through these things. And sometimes, it's this idea of, and you talked about priorities as well. The reality is that if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. And so, this is very top of mind for me because we're just in the process of inviting people into a new program called the Balanced Dad Blueprint, where we're going to be talking first and foremost about priorities, and then how do you build structure, schedules, systems, boundaries to protect what matters most. So anyway, so the difference between time spent and time that matters time spent is, and presence could fall into this, is where you might be there someplace and spending time at home, but you might not actually be doing the things that provide the greatest return on that time spent. And you might not be focusing on the things that are going to produce good outcomes that are matter to you based on your priorities. So you could be there at home, reading. I don't know if people do this: read the newspaper, scrolling your phone, doing whatever, and your kids right beside you. But if you're not actually taking time to connect, we know play is a super, like basically a super part of that. So are you doing the things that actually produce strong relationship? And that's the core: strong connection between people at home. And guess what? Connection can happen in a moment, actually. But we always like to say 10 minutes or less, you can have tremendous impact. So that to me is what we're talking about, where the difference between time spent and time that matters. Are you making the most of the time and being intentional and doing the right things to build the relationship or build the connection or build the things that your children or your partner need from you, that does not require a lot of your time, truly, if you do it right and do it well? That's my take.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly on what you shared there that, and we say this a lot, or I say this a lot. It's not how much time you spend with your child or children. It's what do you do in the time you're spending with your time with your child or children? Because, you know, dads have various amounts of availability to their children. You have a stay-at-home dad versus a dad that has limited amounts because of relationship situations with their child or children. So it's what you do when you have that time that counts. Anything you want to add before we move to our next segment?
Yeah, brief story. So during the separation, which was horrific, the early parts, I was only able to see my kids uh, in a public place for like sometimes an hour or two at a time. Uh, and that was terrible and wrong in what happened, but it's what it was. I spent the time that I had connecting with my children. There was nothing else in the world that was getting my attention or focus while I was there with them. I was 100% all in on them, looking at them, laughing with them, playing with them, engaging with them, asking them questions. Like that for me was the core in what was a very challenging time, but nothing else mattered. And so for me, this is powerful and important. And I'm just telling you that when you commit to it, it makes a difference.
All right, let's move to our next segment, redefining quality time. What are your thoughts on that? Redefining quality time.
Yeah, well, building off of that story I just told, the quantity of time I had with my kids was so limited. At one period of time, I saw them 5% of the time. And so, but through that, not only did I maintain the powerful connection that we had, but I built experiences and memories with my kids that still lasted well after that difficult time. And I believe that was a stabilizing factor both for me, because I needed that, but also for them because their world was basically turned upside down. So if we're focusing on, redefining it, to me, the core is what we alluded to is connection. It's the relationship that you're building with your child. I'm going to throw a partner in there as well, because that's the core of what's buffers you. That's all truthfully like what we're all really looking for, right? We're looking for stronger, healthier, more satisfying, more fulfilling relationship. And so if you focus on the relationship fundamentals, that is what's going to give you the greatest return on the time that you do have.
Nice. I'll add on to that. Just to put it out there, you want to shift from quantity to meaningful connection. Quantity time, you could have lots of quality time with your child or children, but it's not meaningful. And also making sure that the quality time is an intentional presence, not a big production. You don't have to have a big, huge, crazy thing with your kids. It can be simple, something simple, quality that they enjoy. And also asking your kids, what do they enjoy doing? I know fathers that say, well, I don't know what my kids like to do. And I say, well, there's an easy way you can find out. And they go, how? Ask them. Ask them.
or
Don't be
just watch
afraid.
them.
And I will watch them. Yeah, ask them or watch them is really, we want to find what you need to know what your kids really need from time with their dad. Do they need attention? Do they need curiosity? Do they need fun? Watch and find out and then act upon it. And it doesn't have to be a big production. It can be simple, meaningful connection. Meaningful connection doesn't have to be hours upon hours. As Drew said,
Yeah.
it can be 10 minutes.
It's truthfully the most fundamentals. It's looking at your child in their eyes and seeing them. It's smiling at them. It's saying their name in a positive, energetic, excited way. It is putting yourself down onto their physical level. So if they're down on the floor, get down on the floor with them. If they're playing with something that they're excited about, get excited with them. Don't overtake it. Don't let them lead. So there are all these small fundamentals that make a big difference. It's touching them. Meaningful, positive, healthy touch is another way that's hugely important. So these little fundamentals actually are the most powerful and important ways to make the most of your time. I still remember the feeling as my stepdad would put his hand on my shoulder and say a positive word to me when I was a kid, and the difference it made. And I still have that. So for me, those are the things that are making the biggest impact in your child, in the relationship, in the connection, to make the most of that time.
Yeah, it's the little things that make a difference. They don't have to be big, but it's wonderful you shared that memory, Drew, of your stepdad, because the power of touch.
Yes.
It is so again a small thing, but it is a big thing. The power of touch, what's conveyed in the power of touch, really, really good. Let's move up to making it happen, which seems to be always a challenge for dads, making things happen in regards to time. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll share a quick story. So a few years ago, I ran my first Developing the Father in You 12-week program. In that, there was a dad. We created this initial practice in the early weeks around priorities, where we would come home from work or wherever we were coming, and we would spend time, just 5 minutes, with each child, listening to them, asking them, "Tell me about your day. What did you do? How hard was it?" And you would just listen. And the story is that this dad, who had 4 kids at the time, was kind of moving all over the place in terms of the work that he had to do. It was pretty challenging for him, but he committed to this, and he would come home. And within a span of like a week, it became like a fight for each of the kids to literally get on the stool and sit in front of him and go eye to eye with him, because they loved it so much. He just made a commitment, came home. Okay, each kid, you got 5 minutes. I'm just going to sit there and you're going to talk. We're going to go back and forth. And it became so powerful, just because of, one, his commitment, and two, the willingness to put everything else aside, even though he had something stressing him out, and just focus on his children. And look at they responded so powerfully. So I like to share that story because it does not take, as you said, big. It just takes small commitment and giving that undivided undistracted attention. I think that's a big thing. So he not only took the time, but he also built something consistent. Like, it was a consistent thing, a ritual, you could say. It was a practice. So you could build those things in. For me, bedtime is important connecting. And I don't necessarily do as much listening, even though because sometimes they don't want to talk, but I do a simple practice of a simple prayer and a blessing every night. I would also do that in the mornings before, and still do it in the mornings before they go to school. When they leave me, I simply give them a blessing or an affirmation, whatever you want to say, that sends them off to where they're going with a positive regard. And so that, for me, they don't take much time, but what they do is they build consistency, which is important for your kids for structure, but they also build connection, because your children come to expect it. Sometimes when I'm pretty tired and I maybe forget to say my prayer or blessing for Jordan will be like, "Hey, Dad, you didn't pray for me," or, "Dad, you didn't say your blessing." "Oh, okay." So he'll hold me and remind me. So that lets you know the kids are noticing, even though 9 times out of 10 they won't say anything. That one time they do say it, lets you know, okay, this is important. Those are just a couple, I'll say, practical lived examples and stories that I think bring this to life. As far as how do you make it happen? You commit to it.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Drew has just shared with us some really quick points. Like a reoccurring theme through our show today is the micro moments. Identify those 5 to 10 minute windows for connection. You know, it doesn't have to be long, 5 to 10 minutes. And as Drew mentioned, he has rituals, you know, saying the prayer at night, building those rituals that are consistent and intentional. It could be something like Saturday breakfast, could be a nightly chat, and also protect and prioritize time without guilt. Don't feel guilty about giving time to your kids. Not a good place to come from. But also be ready for spontaneity. There could be those moments that just come out of the blue, bang. So, just a little tip for everyone that's listening here. Here's one simple habit that changes everything. When your kid asks for your attention, stop what you're doing for 60 seconds. It's a minute that says, you matter more. So just to take care. So as we come up to the end of today's show,
I'm gonna
we talked.
add,
Go ahead.
Ed,
Yeah.
that is so powerful. I was at a conference years ago with Dr. Peter Jensen. He wrote the book, Igniting the Third Factor, two other books as well. But he talked about an executive, was a high performance executive. And the biggest challenge that people he worked with in his 360 feedback was he never listens. And so he talked through the coaching process with this guy and said, okay, who's the best listener? He says his wife. And he says, what if you were to simply drop what you were doing, put it all down, look the person across from you in the eye, and just simply smile and nod as they spoke to you? What difference do you think that would make? Anyways, long story short, bottom line is that's exactly what we need to do as dads in terms of when they are looking for our attention. If we give them that immediate response, it does exactly what you said. It lets them know that it matters, and truthfully, it's just the best practice everywhere you go. Anyways,
Good
that's a quick
stuff.
little story as well.
No problem. Good stuff. So as we come up to the end of today's show, let's do a review. We talked about the challenge of time. We talked about redefining quality time. We talked about making it happen, and also some points, key points. Quality of time starts with presence, not planning. Also, small, consistent moments build strong relationships. And finally, you don't need more time, just more intention. So, Drew, what's a resource we have to offer our family today?
Yeah, well, we're in the midst of releasing the Balanced Dad Blueprint. By the time this comes out, I think that will be closed. But another resource we have is our Confident Dad Bundle. It is in our store, and I would suggest that's a great way to, one, understand what kids actually need from dad, because it's got child development fundamentals in there, as well as it gives you some practical tips and understanding of how to engage, how to connect through play, as well as the value of, we'll say, these micro moments and how to maximize them. The Confident Dad Bundle.
Excellent. So, two quick things before we finally wrap it up today. First of all, want to share this. Finding time with your kids isn't about squeezing one more thing into your day. It's about turning moments you already have into memories that last. And here's a little call to action. Try this today. Find one 10-minute window to be fully with your child. Put the phone down, listen, play, or just talk. You'll be amazed at what that time creates. So with that, just want to say, as always, I want to thank you for taking the most important thing, your time, to hang out with us today. And as always, looking forward to more conversations. So as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and God bless, peace well, keep the faith, and walk good. Take care.